Hello everyone, my name is Jonathan Hewitt and welcome to the Conservative Voice Show, your place for honest, controversial, and the hottest in political conversations. Hey everybody, so today we're going to jump into the poll data, and we're going to jump really in depth into the poll data as we're sitting about 4 days from the election, and then obviously the weekend coming up, and Halloween and everything like that. So we'll check in all those polls, see what they're saying about the presidency, see where President Trump and Joe Biden are sitting. And then after we're done talking about that, there's also news breaking in Pennsylvania about the National Guard being called in amid all the rioting and protesting following the shooting of an armed man there. And then tomorrow, also make sure that you check in for a spooky special where we'll briefly cover the political news and the breaking news of the day, and then we'll go into some Halloween fun. So make sure you stick around, check out tomorrow, and hopefully it'll be ghouling, I guess. God, my jokes are terrible. Anyway, so first thing is the polls. So the polls have been tightening across the board. And I think it's all after that second debate with President Trump. Is when you look at it, you go to Real Clear Politics, which we'll be using today, along with 538. You can see a distinct, almost turning point in the election, where some polls had Biden up almost double digits, mid double digits, coming up to the early 20s. And after the debate, and as we moved closer to the election, those have definitely began to tighten. In races in places like Florida and North Carolina and other battleground states, they have began to favor or trend in Trump's direction. And so those, I guess, are like the two keynotes of it. But there have been polls that have been released yesterday and today. Yesterday, The Hill had Biden up 4 points in the general election. Today, the general election from an IBD-TIPP has Biden only up 3 points, which is incredibly close, seeing that's the general election. Rasmussen in North Carolina has Trump up 1 point as of today. Trafalgar Group has Trump up 3 points in a Florida poll from today. Yesterday, The Hill, NBC, and Quinnipiac have Biden up only single digits, mid-single digits. So 3 points from The Hill, 4 points from NBC, 3 points from Quinnipiac. And so when looking at this, as of the ones from today, seeing that Rasmussen has Trump up 1 point in North Carolina. Rasmussen has accurately predicted elections 80% of the time, according to 538. And when we look at the national average that they're talking about in the general election, what we have to kind of remember is that the general election is the popular vote. And Trump can lose the popular vote, he can. Hillary beat Trump in the popular vote by almost 3 million votes in 2016. But what matters is the electoral votes. And so even though that he's up now, that doesn't mean that Biden's going to win the election. And what we also can look at is that national vote has continued to shrink from mid-October, with some polls having Biden ahead in double digits. Like I was saying, the general election has shrunk from almost a 13-point lead in Biden's favor to a 3-point lead within the margin of error for Biden. So what does all that really mean with the general election and the national average? Is that the data is trending in Trump's direction. And as long as the weekend goes good for him, there's a possibility that Trump could very well walk away with the presidency in November. Not by a landslide at all. I do not believe that he will have a landslide victory. But remember that Hillary won popular votes and a large majority of the polls going into the 2016 election. So speaking of Hillary Clinton in the polls in 2016 and just kind of comparing them from where we're at now to there, this time in 2016, Florida, Hillary was up 3 points. Trump ended up winning Florida. North Carolina, Hillary was up 2 points. Trump won North Carolina. And Clinton was up 4 points in Pennsylvania this time last year. And Trump walked away with Pennsylvania. If Trump takes those 3 states and wins everything that he won last year, he's going to win the election. He's going to. Florida is counts as 29 electoral votes in the college. North Carolina having 15 electoral votes, which are huge. And that's why you see both Joe Biden and the president campaigning so hard and heavy in those 3 states. Is Florida 29 electoral votes. That is huge. Almost half as much, well, over half as much as there is in California. So with that being said, speaking of just some of the rest of the battleground states, Arizona is still a toss-up. According to the Real Clear Politics national average, it's a tie. Literally a dead tie. But the majority of the polls have Arizona remaining right-leaning. Biden has also foregone Arizona. He's choosing not to campaign in Arizona right now, for whatever reason it may be. He went and campaigned in Nevada instead of Arizona, where Arizona still holds 11 delegates over I believe it's 5 delegates that Nevada holds. And so you're going to give up, even if, let's say, that Biden wins Nevada, but loses Arizona, he foregone Arizona for whatever reason. Either he thinks he already won it, or he doesn't think that he needs it to win the election. Both of which I think is ridiculous. 11 points is still a lot of delegates, more than Minnesota, where he's campaigning in Minnesota against Trump, more than Nevada, where he went to campaign. So giving away that key, what he could have flipped from red to blue this year, he just gave up on it. I think that is going to be a very, very big loss for him. Speaking of toss-ups and ties, there's a big chance that Trump may do something this year that hasn't been done since 1972. So, in a report from Fox News written by Paul Steinhauser, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden and President Trump crossed paths for a second straight day in a crucial battleground state as they enter the final week before Tuesday's vote. On Thursday, they faced off in Florida. Friday, with just 4 days to go until the general election on November 3rd, the showdown takes place in Minnesota, which suggests that a state long carried by Democrats in presidential elections may be in place. President Richard Nixon was the last Republican to win the state during the 1972 landslide re-election. But 4 years ago, Trump narrowly lost Minnesota and its 10 electoral votes to 2016 Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton. And for over a year, the president and his re-election campaign have been eyeing the state in hopes of breaking the losing streak and flipping Minnesota from blue to red. That would be a monumental victory for Trump, and it would be very good for his re-election. If he could end up flipping Minnesota from blue to red, one, it would be history-making, as it hasn't happened since 1972. And two, that would be an additional 10 votes that he did not have when he won the election in 2016. And so the data from Real Clear Politics when it comes to Minnesota it's a bit convoluted in my opinion. But as I was saying in the beginning, a lot of the polls are beginning to trend in Trump's favor. And Minnesota is definitely one of those. So yesterday, a poll release from Survey USA, Trafalgar Group, Minnesota Post, and Star Tribune, all which have Biden leading in a low to mid single digit lead, all within very close margins of error. So the survey group has Biden up 5 points, with the margin of error being 4.6%, which even if it swings in Trump's favor is still 0.4%, but that is still incredibly, incredibly close. The Trafalgar Group has Biden up 3 points with a margin of error of 2.9%. So there's a good chance that Minnesota could go to Trump and that Trump could win Minnesota in the election. So speaking of continuing with that swing state and battleground state data, the same time in 2016, the Real Clear Politics national average. So the national average or the popular vote, like I was saying earlier, Clinton was leading by 4 points. The RCP has Biden only up 3.6%. But that is taken that Biden is doing worse nationally than Clinton did in 2016. And Trump still won the election in 2016. Over the last month or so, Biden's lead has steadily dropped from almost every polls, from some of them having double-digit leads to being low single digits within the margin of error, which we've already shown in the few brief polls we've gone over so far. The Hill had Biden up 5 points. However, the Hill only has a poll accuracy of 60%, according to 538, meaning that out of all the elections that it surveyed and that it polled on, it has only been accurate almost half the time. The insider advantage, which has accurately predicted over 70% of the elections, has Trump up 2 points in a poll from just last week. And for those who also don't know why we talk about battleground states so much, is because they are the ones that either they're purple states. Sometimes they vote blue, sometimes they vote red, and they hold enough delegates to have an impact on the election. And Pennsylvania, even more so right now, is super powerful, and it's up there with Florida. Pennsylvania holds 20 delegates, and therefore both candidates need and want Pennsylvania and Florida as victories in order to hold the Electoral College majority. So speaking of Florida, yesterday Quinnipiac, The Hill, and NBC all had Biden up between 3 and 4 points. Quinnipiac had him up 3 points with a margin error of 2.7. NBC had him up, like I said, 4 points with a margin error of 4.4 points, and that is extremely, extremely close. So those were yesterday's polls. Today's polls that released, Rasmussen and Trafalgar Group had Trump up in Florida. Trafalgar Group had Trump up 3 points with a margin of error of 2.9. Rasmussen had Trump up 4 points with a margin of error of 3.5%. So both of those are reliable polls according to both of those are reliable polls according to 538, with both having over 70% accuracy in predicting elections. And it's worth noting that even if the margin of error in both the Trafalgar Group and the Rasmussen poll swings in Biden's favor, Trump still holds Florida either by a 0.1% or 0.5%. He still wins Florida. He still wins those 29 delegates if it swings in Biden's favor. So, like I said, Florida has mimicked almost every other poll with a Trump-leaning trend towards favoring Trump. I think that it means we can clearly see that the American people are beginning to wake up, that they are beginning to see that Biden is not the best choice for America, that he's not what America needs, and further that a shy Trump vote, which everyone talks about and I still think is out there, is going to be very, very impactful in this election. The difference is that between the shy vote in 2016 with Hillary Clinton and this year is that the difference is even worse. There's even more Trump voters because Trump voters are continuously harassed by the left, unlike they were in 2016. And a majority of Republicans do not share their polling data, and they don't share who they're going to vote for because they just don't want to hear about it. Second, I think that the second presidential debate did monumental things for President Trump. It brought a lot of Republicans back home, a lot of Republicans that were on the fence on whether or not Trump was stable enough to be president again, whether another 4 years with President Trump was worth it, or if Biden was just a more boring, just half-dead candidate that they didn't really have to worry about. Well, that second debate brought a lot of them home, that Trump is what America needs. He is going to do what America needs, and that Biden is not a favorable outcome for us. So, like I said earlier, do I think that Trump will have a landslide victory? No, absolutely not. I think that it's going to be very, very close, and that the deck is continuously stacked against him. And this is proven where a couple days ago, North Carolina and Pennsylvania's Supreme Courts voted that they would allow ballots to be counted after November 3rd. So according to Andrew Liptak in the New York Times, he reports in a pair of decisions welcomed by Democrats, the Supreme Court on Wednesday let election officials in two key battleground states, Pennsylvania and North Carolina, accept absentee ballots for several days after Election Day. In Pennsylvania's case, the court refused a plea from Republicans in the state that it decide before Election Day whether elections officials can continue receiving absentee ballots for 3 days after November 3rd. In the North Carolina case, the court let stand lower court rulings that allowed the state's Board of Election to extend the deadline to 9 days after Election Day, up from 3 days called by the state legislatures. The court's brief orders in the two cases were unsigned. The Pennsylvania order appeared to be unanimous, while the North Carolina one was issued over 3 noted dissents. So what does that mean? Well, that's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. That could mean that it could be 12 days, not 12 days, 9 days after the election, after November 3rd, before we know who the president of the United States is. That means that it could be November 12th before we know who won the election. And that's if neither President Trump or Joe Biden contests the election. If it's contested by either candidate, who knows when we will have the results from the election? It's absolutely crazy. And it goes to show that what are the Democrats willing to do to either A, muddy the water and muddy the election, and B, to try to continually stack the deck against President Trump. It's absolutely crazy, and it's going to be even more crazy to see how November 3rd and the night of November 3rd and the days that follow the election, how all of that's going to turn out. All right, so on to the second topic. After almost 3 days of continued rioting in Pennsylvania, the National Guard and the governor finally acted. Now, I must say I'm actually proud of Governor Tom Wolf. Like, he has done what no other Democratic governor has done in regards to the rioting, and it didn't take him 60 days to do it. So, with that being said, according to Fox News, according to an article written by Fox News and Peter Atkin and Leland Vitteret, additional Pennsylvania National Guard arrived in Philadelphia on Friday to bolster protections after days of rioting following the police-involved shooting of a black man. As guardsmen arrived and organized themselves, at least one passerby kept shouting, "You are 3 days late. Where were you 3 days ago?" True statement. I can agree. Walter Wallace Jr. was shot Monday by 2 officers responding to a domestic call about someone with a weapon. So looting and rioting became more prevalent on the second night, prompting Governor Tom Wolf to authorize the deployment of National Guard troops as police struggled to contain the protests and riots that broke out across the city. Initial troops arrived on Wednesday, but additional troops have arrived as city center becomes more heavily guarded. So that's awesome. I can honestly say that for a Democrat governor to be willing to do that so quickly, I applaud him for that. That is phenomenal, direct contrast to his colleagues, and shows that he at least has the intestinal fortitude to do what's right for his state. Now, remember that what all of this started about, though. So this is all stemming from the shooting of Walter Wallace, where all of the available evidence suggests that it's a justifiable shooting. The police respond to a domestic call involving a man with a weapon. They get there, find Walter Wallace wielding a knife. They continue to readjust themselves, reposition themselves, pointing their guns at them, telling him to drop the weapon, continue to try to retreat, until at one point Walter Wallace charges them, and unfortunately they have to shoot him in order to stop that lethal threat. And that led to Walter Wallace unfortunately dying and succumbing to his injuries. But instead of waiting for the evidence to come out, waiting for the investigation to take place. Rioting and looting overtook the streets of Philadelphia, where 30 plus officers were injured. One officer being ran over intentionally by a vehicle. There's video that yesterday's show where I showed that a police officer was intentionally ran over by a lifted pickup truck. Like, that is absolutely uncalled for. Countless stores have been looted. There's video of Walmart being ransacked by thousands of looters. A Five Below being ransacked by looters. Storefronts with their glass broke. All of this in the name of systemic racism and trying to combat that, because the stores that provide you with their daily service every single day are a endemic and is part of the calamity of systemic racism in America. And so, even though the governor may have acted, what has the Democrat mayor, Jim Kenney, done about it? Absolutely nothing. He hasn't done a single damn thing, to support the law enforcement. They're out there risking their lives every single day to try to bring his city back into order. B, he hasn't done a single damn thing to retake his city. He hasn't done a single damn thing to ensure the safety of the citizens. But he had the same rhetoric that he had back in June when riots broke out in his city, where he said that he would waive every single citation and every single charge written by law enforcement that pertained to rioting and looting. Like, what kind of message does that send to the city? What kind of message does that send to the business owners that had that had their businesses destroyed by the looters? What kind of message does that send to the citizens that were injured by the protesters and the rioters? What kind of message does that send to America about what you're willing to stand for? It's absolutely crazy and is a stigma that has plagued democratic cities since BLM and Antifa have taken them over in riots and looting. So, like I said at the beginning of the show, not much really has broken out in regards of news today, besides obviously the Pennsylvania news and then President Trump and Joe Biden being on the campaign trail in Minnesota. To wrap it all up, I would just restate that I think that we're going to see a lot tighter election than what was originally predicted. I think that Trump's numbers are continuing to press towards him winning a victory on November 3rd or November 12th. Whatever the new voting day comes, as the Democrats try to push the issue of the election. And second, I think that the rioting and looting in America's streets are just a vision of what is to come if the left continues with their rhetoric, and what will come if Joe Biden wins the election. If they're not willing to take over the streets now, what are they willing to do when they're in office and have the power to just shut down and suppress the media, suppress political speech, use big tech companies to their advantage, and ultimately suppress Americans? That is what we're voting for. And we're seeing it every single day in the news. So, all right, guys, that is it for today's show. Make sure you check in tomorrow for that spooky special, which I'm super happy for. I can't wait to do it. I'm going to be dressed up in my Halloween costume and going to be sitting here so y'all can see my goofy self as we go over the news. Make sure, drop a comment if you haven't already. Drop a like, follow me anywhere, and find me anywhere that you watch your podcast. And then also check out my YouTube channel, which will be in the show description, to watch the video live. I hope you all have a great weekend, a safe weekend, a happy Halloween, and I'll see you all tomorrow. God bless.